What's up, weebs? Welcome back to Anime Lane. As always, I'm your host, Notorious. Joining me once again today is just Shaun.
I've been expecting you. It was foretold by Gyromancy.
You were probably expecting Melina to be here as well, but yeah, no, she's just going to be in the rebuilds episodes this month. Well, last month and this month. So it's just me and Shaun again, and as expected, we are talking about video games.
Yeah, of course. It had to happen eventually again.
Yeah.
When you put us in a room long enough.
Yeah, I finally, after saying I would go and try Silent Hill at the end of the Resident Evil episode, I went and played the first 3 games back to back to back.
We unintentionally teased that a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't mean to do that, but it happened.
I'm glad it did. It was fun to see you experience what I had already experienced this year.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed them. I wasn't sure what to expect. But no, I had a lot of fun with 2 of them, specifically.
Oh, we're gonna get right into it, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you actually...
You want to do this by game?
If you want, or I can just say that you pointed out, specifically you were interested to see what I thought of 3. And, because you really liked it, and you said this in the episode at the end of the Resident Evil episode. And, I did not enjoy it all that much. Yeah, I guess we'll get to it. We'll work our way through, because, like, specifically for 3, for me, like, you need the context of 1 and 2 to know why I kind of don't like it as much. But yeah, so I started playing 1, obviously, because that's where you start. You go from the beginning. You go from 1.
That's how numbers work, yes.
And, I really love that game. Like, I think it's a really special game from, like, I think the PlayStation 1 era in general is kind of special. There's a lot of innovation and a lot of like developing and new ideas that would kind of go on to become mainstays of video games.
It's such a cornerstone like era of gaming, the PS1 like N64 generation, where things were making the jump to 3D,
yeah,
and it's like games were finally getting to the next level.
And for me, like, 1, I don't think there's a lot of games that have tried to emulate the atmosphere, aesthetic, and, like, tone of 1. But none have come, like, close to actually capturing how that felt. Like, how it actually feels to play and experience the first game. Because, like, 2 and 3 are largely quite different. 3 shares a lot of kind of similarities to 1 in some senses, but, like, 1 is so unique, even amongst that trilogy. Like, it still feels very different from the other 2, even if 2 and, like, sort of 3 are, like, natural evolutions of stuff established in 1. There's still something about, like, it that's hard to put into words. Like, it just was a lot of fun to play, and, like, it evoked something in me in a way.
There's so much of 1's sort of vibe feels like a cop-out word to like sort of describe it, but I can't think of a better one, where like it's so dependent on the hardware and like the style of games that you get on the PS1, just in terms of how they look.
Yeah.
That really adds to its sort of not quite real dreamlike nightmare sort of thing that it was going for.
Yeah.
Like it feels like you've like been, and this is the intent, you've been dropped into a Stephen King book.
Yeah.
Like right off the bat, which, and it does it so perfectly, and it does it with its style that like even like 2 and 3 don't really get down, even though they've got their strengths in other ways, I'd say. Especially 2.
Yeah.
God, it's just it's hard to put into words how much, because I love 1. I love the way it's set up. It feels so much like the perfect introduction to the series.
Yeah. I also like that a lot of these games from that era, like the puzzle solving could either be trivial, like in Resident Evil. That's not to diss Resident Evil, but its problem solving is rather trivial. Like, it's nothing.
Resident Evil has like two sort of modes to its puzzle solving. Sorry to cut you off a little bit, but where like the puzzles are really easy that they're barely even puzzles, or they're archaically explained so that it takes you 10 more minutes than it really should to figure out. Whereas it doesn't feel like they're masterly crafted like they are in Silent Hill. Because,
like, in the first game, excluding one specific puzzle that is the dumbest shit, everything else feels, like, super rewarding to figure out. And, like, it's all there for you to, like, figure out. Like, they give you all the information you need, and it's whether you... if you can put that together to figure it out. And, like, it might take a bit longer, but, like, it still feels, like, rewarding to go, oh, okay, so the liquid, the chemical that I picked up in this room is meant to be used on this hand thing gripping a stone to melt the hand or whatever it was. And, like, figuring that out's cool.
There's this note from the entrance of the dungeon, to use it for lack of a better term, implied that anyway, so that's how I can figure that out. It does the Zelda thing, where you're giving the pieces, and while it may take you some time, when you figure it out, you feel a little bit like a genius.
Yeah, because you find these notes when you enter the area, and you go, okay, those are meaningless to me. And then you progress through, and you find these items, and you go, oh, hold on, I remember this thing being mentioned. So you run back and you check the note, and you go, okay, I haven't found the other part of this yet. So you do more exploring and you find the other part, and then you go, oh, okay, these two things are meant to go together. Again, all of these are from the same area. The piano puzzle specifically is the only one that, like, I actually just looked up, because I did not want to put the amount of brain power into it that had to be put in to figure, and then it would become trial and error too, as well.
I would like to say right here, did it without having to look it up.
I knew what it wanted me to do, but I read it and then I went, I don't want to do it.
It sucks that, like, it's one of the most abstract sort of clues in the game, because it talks about, like, that refers to the keys as, like, different birds and stuff, and you kind of have to know that, oh, it's a pelican, so we want to hit, like, the white key here, and, like, the dark key here, but no. And it's annoying because it's one of the most abstract ones, and it's also, like, the first real puzzle of the game. So if they had placed it, like, a little, like, in, like, the end section, I think it wouldn't be as bad as it is.
Yeah, I read it and I was like, I know what you want me to do. I know how you want me to figure this out, but, like,
fuck you.
Yeah, it's the amount of information you're having to parse and decode and then transpose onto a musical instrument that just then is like, okay, this isn't fun to solve, it's actually just actively frustrating me to solve it. So I was like, I'm going to avoid the frustration because of how much I'm enjoying this, and I'm just going to look up the answer. Whereas everything else, like, it felt very rewarding. It was the same with 2. Like, I think maybe 1 or 2 puzzles I ended up, like, not looking up the answer, but looking up, like, a general direction I had to go in, because I would feel like my logic was on the right track, but I had hit, like, a brick wall where, like, I can't actually figure this out with what I have to hand now. I think I'm missing something, but I've been everywhere, so let me figure out where I need to go. And in some cases it was, like, backtracking in a way that you wouldn't naturally have done. So, like, because that was my thing with the apartment area in 2. Sorry, just to jump ahead to 2 for a sec. Like, I remember kind of bumbling about a little bit before, like, things kind of you opened up to progress through that area, kind of going, well, I've explored everything, but I can't find anything to let me further progress. But it was a case of, like, you actually have to go back to one of the floors and go to a specific point and it'll trigger this thing to happen. It's like, okay, well, I wouldn't have naturally done that because the map also then tells you if a door is usable, so I wouldn't have then gone back and tried all the doors again. So
Yeah. I will say this is probably something that doesn't. That's surprisingly something that you don't realize is something it's something that reflects the age of the game, because a lot of games from this like era sort of depended on having that moment where the player just wondrously backtracks and trying in hopes of finding something, and they sort of rely on that for their puzzle solving, which was a common thing in games of like the PS1, PS2 era.
Yeah, it's just interesting that Silent Hill of all games employed that when it's actually very generous and how it conveys information to you. Like, the map is constantly being updated with either you can't enter this place, you may need a key for this door, or here's a specific thing you're going to need to come back to later once you have an item. And so, like, when you have all of that, it doesn't feel like the game is then actively, like, encouraging you to backtrack. It's always, like, kind of pushing you to, like, look for something new because you're missing something. So
there's always an unexplored room or a room that you want to check again.
Yeah. Whereas, like, but the apartments in 2 are like the only time that ever happens. The rest of the game's like fine, it never does that again. But yeah, 1 was like a lot of fun for that sort of like puzzle solving mix of action as well. Like, it's survival, but like, again, the game's very generous in the amount of ammo and stuff that you get on normal difficulty anyway. So it's not too much of a challenge, and like, if you're using the like steel pipe for a good chunk of the opening and like through the school and stuff, you're gonna have like enough ammo for the rest of the game and not worry.
Even if you're not, if you just like avoid enemies, you can do the same thing, because that's how I played Silent Hill 1 originally, where
I just found killing them very satisfying.
You see, I couldn't get that. I didn't find it satisfying in 1 with the melee weapons. I found it more of an annoyance. Once
I figured it out, it became like super satisfying for some reason. Like, it was frustrating at first, but I persevered. And like, especially out in the town where like the flying things are, and like once I kind of got that down, I was like, okay, I really like this, and then I just went around bonking everything in my path.
For 1 specifically, I just sort of, well, I say 1 specifically, I do it again in like other games, but like, I sort of got into the opposite, not the opposite, but a different direction of, instead of just fighting them, I would just run. Where I needed to. Like, if I don't need to fight the enemies, then I will. Like, that's like my go-to survival horror strategy if I'm not confident enough in the game yet.
I think for 1, like, eventually I felt like I had to clear the areas, because like, a lot of enemies in 1 can like grab you, and like, if there's a couple of enemies, then one of them will actually hit you while you're grabbed too. And I was like, I don't want to be dealing with that if I'm trying to like just go for a specific room that I need to go back to. So for the sake of backtracking in the future, I'm just gonna kill everything, because I'd rather not deal with the potential of like getting grabbed. And then 2, like, it was just so ingrained at that point, I was like, these enemies aren't grabbing me, but I just want to beat the shit out of them anyway.
By 2, it felt like the melee mechanics had gotten like more like satisfying for me. That was when I started employing it, but I still had the default strategy of like, okay, so I'm gonna go into the hallway, try and map out my route, go back to the room so that the enemies sort of reset a little bit, and then run through. Like, that was my go-to when I was in like a tough spot and I didn't want to waste ammo.
It's funny, I tried that like a handful of times in 3, where I was like, okay, I need to leave this room and let the enemies reset. And like, I guess in 3 they just don't reset, because some of them did not go back to where they were.
Yeah, by the time 3 happens, the enemies are a lot more sort of variant on where they're gonna end up when you enter the room.
Yeah.
I find fun, but I can see why you find it annoying.
Yeah, there's one room where like I actively had to tank a bunch of damage just to get past 2 enemies because they were blocking the way. Very dumb. Anyway,
sucks to suck, but
I actively still did better in the end statistically than you.
Sucks to suck.
But no, one like, It's weird, like 2 is the one that's on my mind a lot more, but like 1 is still like a super like special.
It's a fantastic game.
Yeah.
Honestly, even after beating 2, for sometimes I was like, maybe 1 is my favorite. Like, even just in terms of just gameplay, because 1's gameplay is really good, and I think I will say it does sort of help that like both of us played a bunch of Resident Evil games beforehand, so we knew. And Silent Hill 1 specifically feels like it is trying to evolve the Resident Evil formula in its own spin.
Yeah.
So it feels like a natural sort of evolution from when you play it there. I also like that 1 sort of gives you the idea that like Silent Hill is more of a series you're supposed to think about more. And and it is a lot more story based. Like, not to throw shade to Resi again, it's a series I love, but its stories are never like the most like artistic concrete things.
I think the best sort of like way that you can look at it is that like Resident Evil is the 80s cheesy action horror, whereas like Silent Hill is like a proper atmospheric horror, like you said, being dropped in like a Stephen King book compared to being dropped in They Live.
Aliens.
Or Aliens.
They Live,
yeah. Sort of like that John Carpenter versus Stephen King type vibe.
Yeah. And like Resident Evil, I think it focuses more on just being a fun gameplay experience.
Yeah.
Because you're still the characters you're playing are either like cops or ex-cops and like special teams and stuff, or they're like Biohazard boulder punching legend Chris Redfield and Leon Kennedy,
or the sibling of them.
Yeah. Whereas in Silent Hill you are Stephen King insert Harry Mason.
Yeah.
Who can barely fire a gun.
Which is something the game tells you like very like near the start, is that like the further something is away from you, the harder it will be for Harry to hit the target, so it actively encourages you to like let them get closer before you attack them. Whereas like Resident Evil, it's like, fuck you, figure it out.
Yeah, well, in Resident Evil, it's you aim, you pull the trigger, your shot goes. Get good.
You point the sharp end forward.
We haven't even really talked about the actual story as well as the thing, even though it's such a story focused.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this. It's weird. The story in 1 kind of actually takes a back seat for a lot of the time that you're playing it. Like your active,
it is there, but
your active goal is like find Cheryl, your daughter, and you're kind of like being led at first by like random kind of like notes that you find lying around, being like, go to this house. When you go in the house, you like have to solve a puzzle to open the door, that because you've also been told that you need to go to the school, so you go through there, you go to the school, you look around.
But there's already like subtle themes being like put in as well, because like the puzzle to get through the house is sort of based on like the Wizard of Oz, and like you're getting keys that have like the symbol of like the Tin Man, and like the Cowardly Lion and stuff, sort of giving you an idea of children's books and like fairy tales and stuff, which feeds into later in the game when you sort of realize what's actually happening in the town.
I would just say that like the storytelling in 1's actually far more subtle compared to like a very narrative driven experience of 2. I think it's just a much more kind of like,
and even 3 has like a very narrative experience as well, so like it makes 1 an outlier, because like, and it's one of the things I actually really like about 1, you have to piece together its story yourself. Like I said it to you back when I first played it near the beginning of the year, I did not really understand the story until like right at the end, and then I sort of had a moment of, oh, it all sort of begins to make sense now. Like, I've seen this note and I've read this paperclip or whatever that like explains this, and now suddenly everything is clicking into place.
Yeah. Though if you're playing the English version, you need to go, or if you're playing the American version, I think specifically, you need to go look up a specific note because one of the most important ones in the game is fucking missing for some reason.
Yeah. In fact, the PAL version does have like that newspaper clip, which is very important to have, by the way.
But who in the year of the Lord 2024 is playing the PAL version when you've got the emulators available?
Exactly.
But yeah, no, it's much more kind of subtle storytelling that you're meant to piece together, and like you can actually actively ignore a whole bunch of it to end up, which if you're playing your first experience and don't know anything about the game, you're going to end up pretty much with the bad ending. Like that's kind of bog standard. I knew that I didn't want to be like, I knew it was different from Resi, so I didn't want to have the Resi experience of like, I'm going to play this 4 times back to back. So like, because like Resi, like we talked about in it, it's like you could do like a 3-hour run. Like it's not that. Whereas like Silent Hill's like a 6-hour, 7-hour experience in your first playthrough. And so I didn't want to like have to then extend that by doing like another one where I had to go find more stuff.
And it's also the fact that because Silent Hill is more narrative focused, doing multiple playthroughs feels more taxing to me compared to Resident Evil. Whereas I can play like Resi 2 another 8 times, and even though it's the same story over and over again, the gameplay is more the focus, and just like getting in the rooms and like navigating it in maybe a faster way is sort of the point, like half the point of the games. Whereas in Silent Hill, you have to find these items in a very specific way. You can't sequence break as much. I think in 1, the only time I can really think of when you can sequence break is when you have like a passcode that you can enter in before you've really found the clues, and it still works.
Oh, is that the name?
It's in the hospital, I think.
Yeah, where it's like it's got it's like age. You've got to figure it out by like oldest to youngest or something like that. Yeah, I figured that out like almost immediately, because it's like the clues there. The password is the bit to put the password in is I just wrote all the names down and was like, okay, so I guess I go first letter for all of these, and then it spells like alarm, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. The only time in Silent Hill 1 you can really sort of sequence break is you don't even have to look at the names. You can just go straight to the passcode and then put it in. That's the only time you can really do it, whereas the rest of the game, you need to check what keys you need before you can pick up the keys to get through the house that gets you to the school. Yeah. It's a bit more of like a railroad experience, whereas because Resident Evil doesn't have that as much, repeat playthroughs don't feel as taxing.
Yeah. Because like I find myself even skipping, like if I'm replaying 2, like when I'm doing the opening section, I'll probably skip the cutscene where you go into Kendo's gun shop. I'll skip the cutscene where the liquor shows up, because like by that point I've taken out all the zombies in Kendo's gun shop, and I've gone and picked up his shotgun, so I can easily deal with that liquor, and then I just progress through. Which, fun fact, not many people actually know that that's a thing, because I never see anyone talk about this. If you're playing Resident Evil 2, I probably wouldn't advise this on your first playthrough, because you're probably going to want that ammo. But if you know what you're doing, you've played it 1,000 times, you can kill the zombies that break into Kendo's gun shop and kill him, and investigate his body. If you investigate it twice, you actually pick up his shotgun that he has, which means that when you start the gate, when you get into the police station, you're not having to like avoid the liquor straight away. You can just immediately kill it.
I want to state, by the way, only Leon gets the shotgun, Claire gets her bowgun.
Okay. Because
like it's funny, I didn't even realize it until you could pick it up, but like for Leon, he's just got like a normal shotgun that he aims at him, but then if you play as Claire, he's just got a random fucking crossbow that he's just aiming at her.
I've actually never noticed that before.
Yeah, I know. It's not until you actually like realize you can pick it up that you actually notice he's holding her with a he's aiming at her with a fucking crossbow.
Oh, huh. Wow.
I know.
Don't do that on a clear save if you want to get the alternative costumes, by the way, because obviously you need to get to the police station without killing anything first,
or picking anything up, any ammo.
Yeah, and then you need to take out Brad.
It will take all of your ammo.
Yes.
You have at that point, because he's a beefy motherfucker. Yep. We're talking about Resi again.
Yeah, sorry. But yeah, Silent Hill 1.
Fantastic experience, and I say this having I did play it twice because I didn't do what you did, and I didn't ensure I got the good ending
Yeah.
on my first playthrough. I wanted to just see what I would naturally get, and it turns out you are very much going to get the bad ending on your first playthrough because getting the good ending is so out of your way, and you wouldn't think to go in that direction.
Yeah, you need to do some very specific things to get the good end, specifically the good plus ending, the best ending. You need to do some very specific.
I would say one is a game that is worth playing twice. Like, I feel like I'm close to saying that is part of the experience, but
Yeah.
obviously to each their own. But it was getting that bad ending, and like it is a bad ending because you don't Harry doesn't get like Cheryl back or anything. You end up having to basically kill her god form or whatever. And then like he's just sort of sits in despair as like the other world just sort of burns around him, and then after the credits it cuts to his dead body in the car, and it's like, guess what? It was a dying dream, bitch. And it's like, oh well, that sucks. I don't want to do that. I want to get a better ending now.
Yeah, it's one I want to revisit. It's just that like I wanted to start playing 2 and 3 as well, so like I didn't want to be stuck on the first game for too long. And like I think like it's that thing of games with multiple endings like that are designed very much in the time that they come from, where like you would have probably only had Silent Hill. That would have been your one new game for a while.
Rent it for a weekend.
Yeah, and so like you're wanting to do as much as you can, and then you're wanting to replay it to get that good ending because you know you've done something wrong. You're trying to figure it all out. Whereas like now it's like I have the whole trilogy I want to play through, so it's like, okay, I'm gonna get the best ending I can in that first playthrough, and maybe I'll come back to it later. But I want to play 2 and I want to play 3 as well.
And I'm not gonna judge you for wanting to get to 2 like as fast as possible because 2 is a really good game.
Yeah.
And I love it when I love seeing people react to that story for the first time.
Yeah.
Wow.
2 is just
Last thing I do want to say about 1, it is also fun getting the UFO ending in that because it completely cuts off like the climax of the game. Just to go, what the fuck? Great for a speedrun.
Yeah. But yeah, 2,
the big one.
Possibly one of the greatest games of all time. Like, not personally, like, it is in, like, my it is very high up personally on my list, but, like, not, like, near the top, just personally, because there's a lot of other games I really love. But, like, I, in an objective sense, would say genuinely, like, there are no other games like Silent Hill 2. There is potentially no game better at what it does. Like, it sets out with a clear goal, it executes on it flawlessly, and it is a game that will stick with you for a long time after you finish it. It's
To get my thoughts in like a sentence, Silent Hill 2 is the game you point to when you want to say to someone video games are art.
Yes.
Like, it is the prime example in my mind now for that whole thing. And it was doing it way back in 2001 when that was barely even a debate yet on like if that was possible, because people were like, they're just video games, who cares?
Because like 1's opening sort of, it establishes all the fancy stuff that the game can do with the technology, and then 2 is very reserved. It immediately puts the story to you, and in a way that's just incredibly gripping. It sets the tone, it sets the atmosphere, it establishes the character you're playing, because I genuinely, when playing Silent Hill 1, kept forgetting his name was Harry. I kept thinking his name was James, and I knew that was the protagonist of 2, and I knew they weren't the same person, but I couldn't for the life of me remember what his fucking name was.
To be fair, and I love Harry Mason, but he is generic horror protagonist. Like, and I really do mean, when I say like Silent Hill 1 is a Stephen King book, I mean he is straight out like a Stephen King book protagonist as well. That he's just Stephen King's self-insert.
100%. but like 2 immediately gets you invested in James's plight, his position as a character.
The whole game is about characters.
Yeah, and so like you're immediately hooked onto this journey, this adventure of trying to figure out what's happening. Is Mary there? Is Mary alive? What happened to Mary? And I think the game gives you enough nuggets as you go along that like you can figure it out, but it's not until the actual revelation that like that impact actually hits, because it's one thing for the game to convey that information to you so that you can figure it out. It's another thing to have the character openly actually say the thing that everyone's thinking. Because a lot of the time in media in general, the general story trope of that is the denial part.
Yes.
Whereas
Liar revealed.
We immediately get the acceptance stage. He admits it. He accepts that he's done it. So I guess spoilers for 2.
Yeah.
It's very easy to piece together that James probably killed Mary as you're like playing along. Not like immediately, but certainly like a couple of hours before you get to the point of him, you know, realizing.
It is something your brain can figure out and go, did he?
Yeah.
Did he kill her? And that's why he's here? It's very easy to figure out. I just to sort of begin my thoughts on like the story real quick. I love that like one sort of set up the whole cult thing and like why the town was like this and what led to the town getting like this, but 2 feels like it took that idea and went, okay, what if we put the actual cult stuff on the back burner for now because Harry basically dealt with them in the first game? What would the town do now without the cult? And it's just this power that emanates from it. What would it do? And what kind of experiences would it have? And so it took that idea and plopped a character like James Sunderland into it, who has done something horrible, but because of the town's power and his own mental state after the fact, it warps him into this denial fugue state sort of thing where he's convinced himself that Mary is alive and that he needs to find her, but in actuality he's running from the truth. And that is a beautiful like story to start that you don't even have all the pieces yet.
Yeah, and I think there's that thing of like just before he like admits it, you have almost all the confirmation that you need to know. And so there's that point where the player is like, it's kind of stomach turning to think you're playing actively possibly the antagonist. But then you have the actual information, like you actually find everything out. The game tells you everything, and you find out it's much more complex. And it's
absolutely
it's so like it's heartbreaking. Because you kind of, I guess it depends on the ending you get, but like for the ending I got, which was the leave ending, it's very much kind of put across that he did it, and that's bad, of course, but there was sort of maybe an unspoken like agreement between them in a way, where like she knew the impact it was having on him, that she was ill and that she wasn't, you know, and that he was suffering because of that, and she wanted it to end, and you hear that in her closing narration, which I'm actually just kind of welling up thinking about. And so there's like that thing where like there's a cut scene that kind of implies that like maybe they agreed that that's what he should do because it ends the suffering for both of them.
Yeah, there's an interpretation there that's very valid and you can like make, but the beauty of 2's story is that it's so human, like outside of all the supernatural stuff that even like 1 and 3 really lean into. 2 is so human and so down to earth in the actual things it's trying to tell you. It tells it in an abstract way with the monsters and all that, but the crux of the story is that James and Mary went through a horrible illness that destroyed Mary, like, mentally and physically. And they tried to hold on, but like as what tends to sadly happen, it gets to them. In their own way. Mary lashes out at James and becomes very verbally abusive to him, as it's implied, like, near the end. And James, after trying to stay strong on that for so many years and struggling, he eventually just snapped and wanted it to end, either for just himself or for both of them. It's up to interpretation, and again, dependent on the ending. How he deals with that and what happens to him next is dependent on how the game plays out, and it's not even a simple, like, oh, go through this door. Well, okay, there is a part where you can go through two different doors and they affect the ending, but not in like this one obviously leads to this and this one obviously leads to that. It's little choices and the little things you wouldn't even think of as choices that you do that end up having huge impacts on if he can forgive himself.
Because there's
if he can just deny.
Because there's no point where you're like playing the game where you're like, oh, this feels like I'm making decisions. Like you're just playing the game how you naturally feel is right, however that might be. And it's not until you get the ending that you kind of, I guess, in the modern day, you go and look up, like, how did I get that ending? And you find out that it's very complicated and how the game maths it out. And it's, like you say, it's not a simple set of decisions. It's actively, like, I genuinely don't think there's any other game that does this. Actively entirely comes down to how you have played the game, how much you've kept yourself, like whatever state you've kept yourself in, whether that's being healed up all the time or actively being low on health. It's how
are you more cautious or are you more like risk, like I don't know, risk uncaring. I don't know what the word I'm actually trying to say. But like if you're, it's like the opposite of risk averse. Is like what my brain is trying to say. But like if you're throwing yourself into danger more, it basically adds to it like a equation or a formula on basically James's mental state. Which in turn leads to whether he's going to kill himself in the ending or not.
And then there's also Maria, who, depending on if you are close to her all the time, if you actively protect her, or maybe hit her, because that's an option, or bump into her, or stuff like that, like it can lead to an ending related to her. And also,
where she basically wins.
There is a choice there that can be made where, like, if you try to go back into her room a bunch of times at near the end of the game, that actively adds into the ending you get.
If you know how the game works, there are more choices that you can like figure out. Are you good?
I just suddenly heard bells in my headphone and I got very confused.
It's Christmas. The Christmas present. But when you figure out how the game like works, you can notice more choices that feel like they're swinging one way or the other. So it is, if you're trying to get a specific ending, basically you can figure it out. And it is possible. But like on my first playthrough, to give context, I sort of knew some aspects of the games. Like I will say I knew the twist like before I played the game, but I didn't know the full details. I knew James had killed Mary. I didn't know what led to, well, I knew the disease led to that, but I didn't really get the nuance of how layered that decision would be until it happened. But I also knew that like the ending was determined on your play style. I tried not to let it affect me too much. Like I didn't know like the details of healing a certain, like keeping myself this safe would like lead to this ending, but I did know that like if I act like close to Maria, is that gonna affect the ending basically? And on my first playthrough I did kind of do that a lot because like I didn't want to play James as a dickhead. I didn't want to just hit her. I wanted to be like, okay, I'll keep you safe, you're following me. You're sick. I'll check back on you later. And like, I did it again on like Remake because Remake does the same thing and gives you those choices again. And both times I was like, am I gonna get like a Maria like focused ending here? I didn't on either account. I got the leave ending both times, but it's stuff like that where like you're not entirely sure and it feels a lot more natural into your gameplay that I love about how the endings are made.
Yeah. I knew nothing. I actually knew nothing when I was playing.
I tried to make sure you knew nothing, especially when you did Silent Hill 1 and you were like, oh, I'm following this guy to get the good ending because of the reasons you explained. My first thing I did was, okay, that's cool, you can do that. But when you play 2, do not, under any circumstances, look up how to get any ending because that is part of the experience. I made sure to get that through to you. I figured you already kind of knew anyway, but I wanted to make sure.
I knew that like 2 was much more complex and wasn't as set out of like bad, good plus, bad plus type thing.
Will you shoot friend or not?
Yeah, like I knew it was a little more complex than that, and so I kind of knew I wanted to go in as blind as possible. And for one, like, I was blind playing it in the sense of like the guide, quote unquote, was just a list of make sure you go here, make sure you do this, make sure you pick up this item, and not like a guide of like go through here, have this conversation, you'll see this cutscene.
Like a walkthrough, it's a point by point. I did the same thing when I was getting the good ending.
Yeah.
For 1.
Where 2, I went in completely blind, and I literally just played it like as like naturally
how you play it.
Yeah, as how I would play it. Which is like, as I've played that and I've been playing other games and like I've played other stuff this year like Dark Souls and stuff, and like it always raises that question. Sorry, this is sort of a mild tangent. What is the definition of fun? And
what
like,
is the definition of fun?
That's an interesting thing when it comes to video games, because like Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill in general isn't fun.
No,
but it's fun.
Yeah. But we sort of mentioned it before, it's less gameplay focused like Resident Evil. It's not about like getting like high kills or just being efficient at the game. That's something like Resident Evil or like Dead Space or
but
just
there's
to go on like more survival horror stuff. But the fun comes from experiencing.
But even then, this is a best example actually. Our gameplay styles in Silent Hill vary vastly, but they're both fun for us. Like, I derive enjoyment out of it, of beating the shit out of the enemies most of the time.
You monster. You murderous monster.
And you derive...
You're gonna get the possessed ending in 3, you bastard.
And you find fun in avoiding all that and playing it like as an actual like survive. Don't fight, survive.
Yeah, like I love... This is a big thing for me and like how my brain works. I can be a huge soft spot for like immersion in games, and survival horror I think is another reason why that genre really like activates the happy chemicals in my brain, and that I can be very immersive and really feel like a helpless individual in a terrible situation, and as I get better at the game I can get better at the situation, whereas to the point where in Resident Evil I'm like fucking Leon Kennedy and like doing it in the most efficient manner, but then I go to Silent Hill and I'm like actively hiding from monsters and like trying to run past in the best way. I find that really fun. Just like surviving. Yeah,
and then for me with 2, like again I was doing that like kill everything on sight. It doesn't matter if it's actively threatening me. I see it, I'm gonna go take it out.
I got a gun, I want to fire.
I have a plank of wood with a nail in it, and I want to feel the joy of it going in there.
I am going to kill you with the nail bat.
And like that in turn ended up sort of bleeding into how unconsciously I ended up treating Maria. Like, I never actively sought to deal damage to her, and I did actually try and protect her when I could, like if I was in combat situations, but I wasn't when navigating anywhere, I ran a lot. I didn't walk, I ran. And so that meant I wasn't actively close to her at any given point, because the game never kind of encouraged me to like keep her close. And so I was like, okay, fuck it, I guess I can run and she'll catch up, I don't care.
I mean, it does sort of play into like how video games are just structured as well, even back then, because like when you have a companion character, most famous example again, Resident Evil 4, Ashley's always right behind you when she's with you. You can't lose her unless she's like been downed or whatever, and so you're expecting something similar with Maria, like, oh, sure, I can run away, she'll catch up, it's fine. Because I did something similar. I never actively tried to cause her harm, and I would protect her if I felt like I needed her, but I'd also just be like, okay, I do want to get a move on, so you'll just catch up, wouldn't you? Yeah, sure, cool.
And like, that as an unconscious decision actually plays in to your ending, like, whether you go, okay, well, I now have this companion character, I need to stick close to them, and I need to protect them, or I just want to, look, I got places to be, girl. I have a location I'm going, we're getting there. Whether you keep up, not my problem.
Yeah, they execute it as well. Again, just, I know you've not played it, but in 2 Remake, it does a thing, but like, the way the story is structured in there's a part where after you meet Maria there, she says, oh, you can go this way to get to your next point, but you're given the ability to explore the area of Silent Hill that you're in, and they've added so that if you go off the path that she basically points you towards and try and explore more things, that'll add points away from her ending. Because there'll be times where like, I said to go this way, this isn't really where I want to go, and James will be like, yeah, but I want to see what's here though. So like, I'll deal with that later. Don't worry about it.
Because that is one of the interesting things of like 2 is Silent Hill's it's a bigger town and there's more to explore, but like when you meet Maria, you kind of have to go where she wants you to go during that section. Like there isn't actually many items to find, a lot of the routes are actually blocked, and to get to the point where you can look around and find more items, you actually have to progress through the part that she's leading you to. So like I find that interesting that they've actually added to that in 2, where you can then go, because like I said, 2 is the games in general except 3 are like super generous with the amount of items that you get, and like if you actively explore the town in 2 more so than 1, you're gonna have a lot of items, you're gonna have a lot of healing, you're gonna have a lot of ammo, you're not gonna struggle through the game, which I find very interesting, because the more you do that and the more you fight and the more you have health to heal James, the more the game's kind of actually leading you indirectly towards the leave ending.
This is a big thing as well, because I looked up like the actual calculations and how the ending is put out. It is complicated, but there is like a point system to it, and it's been found that like the leave ending is given a boost, especially on a first playthrough compared to the other ones, because like it starts off at default like 4 affinity points, it's called, whereas Maria gets 3 and In Water gets 2. And there are more opportunities where like you can max out the leave points to like 8. Whereas like, and I think Maria's like at 7 and then Water's like 4. So it's swayed. And the game also has like a tiebreaker like system where like if 2 endings have the same sort of affinity points, if it's your first playthrough, it'll tie break to the leave ending. And then on subsequent playthroughs, if you've got a tie break, it'll tie break you to the ending you haven't seen yet.
Interesting.
Which I was just thinking about not long before we did these recordings, because I went back into my 2 playthrough, my 2 remake playthrough, my last save just before the final boss fight. And on that playthrough, I got the leave ending, but I was curious because I knew for a fact I had done a lot of Maria-oriented stuff as well. So I was like, and there was just one decision at the end of the game where it's like choosing which door do you go through, the Rust Egg door or the Scarlet Egg door. On my leave ending, I had chosen the Rust Egg door, and I was curious on, if I choose the Scarlet Egg one, is that going to push me to the Maria ending? Because I think I'm close. And it did. Which means on that first playthrough, I was so close.
Oh, I didn't know that door choice had any impact. And I don't remember what I picked in the original, to be fair, so...
Yeah. it's again, it's those subtle things. Remake adds like a couple more of them, but I know the door one was in the original as well.
Because I know
so it's
that
just after the two pyramid head boss fight.
Because I know that when you go through that door, whether you stick around and listen to the whole conversation that you hear, again adds points to one or the other ending. Like if you ignore it, depending on your playstyle, I could be remembering this wrong because I've read the same article you have on how it calculates the ending system. But I believe depending on how you've played the game so far depends on if ignoring that conversation adds points to Maria or adds points to In Water, because I think it can do either or depending.
If you rush through that hallway, because it's a long hallway, if you rush through it and ignore the conversation, it adds a point to Maria. But if you listen to the full conversation, it adds a point to both Leave and In Water.
Ah, okay, that's what it is, right. Yeah, because I guess depending on James's mental state depends on how he's gonna react to that conversation.
Yeah, it's basically at that point it's basically deciding, does he choose Mary? Does he care about Mary to listen to that conversation, or is he disregarding Mary at this point, which leads to him logically choosing Maria in her stead. That's the kind of game 2 is, and it's so good at what it does.
I would actively encourage anyone playing it the first time not to look up how to do it, obviously just to play through like as they naturally would, because we've talked about like the actual story, but like if you play it and experience this, it's an entirely different thing to experience it. And we've not talked about some of the actual big parts that I think had an impact on both of us. I highly encourage anyone to try and get the Leave ending. Like, I know the game pits you and leads you naturally towards that and like heavily favors it, but the Leave ending is extremely impactful in how it wraps everything up. Like, I know In Water is kind of fucked up.
There's arguments mainly between Leave and In Water for what's like the definitive ending of the game, basically because of like different like comments even from like developers, because I forget his full name, but he's like the art director for 2. He's very active on Twitter.
Oh, I have forgot.
Yeah, but he's like the lead art director, I think, and he's talked about before how his personal interpretation of 2's story is he always imagines In Water as his ending, the one he usually thinks to, and I think the Silent Hill 2 novelization
uses the In Water ending, yeah.
So there's arguments on, well, it's favored by the devs and it's in the novelization, so that's the canon ending. But like that same developer has very much insisted that there is no canon ending. It's up to your interpretation and what you get. And personally, I find the Leave ending the most satisfying ending in a narrative sense.
I assume Maria doesn't, but does In Water still have the letter at the end?
Yes.
Okay.
The letter's the same no matter what.
I don't think the letter would have the same impact without doing the Leave ending.
I understand it. I think personally the letter works perfectly in Leave, like you, and In Water it serves more as a tragedy, because I think it's implied In Water he doesn't even read the letter before he, But, like, you hear it and Mary's going like, I want you to live, James, and all that.
That's why I'm thinking,
it's supposed to be a very tragic thing in that case.
But I think it's actually it's much more bittersweet and more emotionally impactful in the Leave ending, though, I think. Like,
yeah, I love it because it feels... I keep talking over you, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
I keep wanting to go off, but like... On Leave, I feel like it's a lot more narratively satisfying and a lot more impactful if James doesn't take the easy way out and actively chooses to live with what he's done and move past it, as well as taking Laura.
Yeah.
We can talk about the actual ethics of, can he just take this child?
There's no one there. So
I know, but like, he's just killed his wife, and now he's taking this child who was probably going to be adopted by said wife, but he didn't even meet until like today.
True. I
But,
guess
like,
he's
I am a
following through on his dead wife's final wish, I guess.
Yeah, that's how I think Leave wants you to take that, and from a storied fiction like sense, I can accept that wholeheartedly because I am in the end a sucker for hopeful endings, especially after dark stories. So Leave just sort of gets me like fully, and I'm so happy I got that on my first playthrough, because I think if I got In Water on that first playthrough, the game wouldn't have quite as hard an impact on me as it does, ironically enough.
And I can't imagine playing this in the HD collection with the new voiceover. Like, imagine getting all the way through that game, because not only is this one of the, like, for the time, stunningly voice acted by everyone involved, but the voice actress for Mary, like, crying during reading the letter is incredible stuff.
It is one of the best moments in gaming, I think, when you get that, when you listen to that letter. It's one of the best performances.
Yeah.
It's funny, because playing 2 Remake, I really like the Mary voice in that as well. And James actor in the Remake does a fantastic job as well. I think I like him a bit more than the original even.
Yeah. Sometimes the original James comes off a little flat and stilted.
There are times where it feels like he is almost trying to be a Resident Evil character in terms of performance and goofiness. Like, there's a part in the original 2 that was pointed out to me, and I can't unhear it now, where, like, it's when, like, they're in the hotel, or in the hospital, I think, and, like, him and Maria have to, like, open, like, a weird container or whatever, and Maria just picks up whatever's inside, and she's like, ugh, this is disgusting, you take it. And James just like, thanks. All goofy like.
Oh yeah, that's where, like, there's a fridge, and you have to come back with her when you find her. And
okay.
Yeah.
It is a fridge. I was like, is it a fridge?
Yeah, it's just a fridge sitting in the middle of a room for some reason.
But Maria just takes it. She's just like, oh, that's disgusting, you hold on to it. And James is just like a dipshit, like, thanks.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I can't take that seriously.
Yeah.
Played a lot more straight in Remake, which is nice. But my point is, the Maria voice actress is really good in Remake too. But
that final letter's hinged on the
she does as well a job as I think she could have, but it's not the same.
No, when you, because if you're, I think it may take playing it with headphones on. I'm not entirely sure if it would come across the same on, like, TV speakers or something. But there's a point where you genuinely sit there listening and go, are they crying? And then you realise they are. And it just so, like, shifts the emotional, like, perception and reception that you have to that, to realise that someone who is a professional is reading through this and is actually actively responding emotionally and breaking down.
They're in the character.
They're in the character, and, like, it's so effective that I can't imagine, like, even if someone does a stellar job, I can't imagine it having the same impact without that.
No.
But yeah, it's very subtle. If you're not wearing headphones, like, I think you would only really know it if you heard someone talking about it, or if you looked it up to know that, like, they broke down when they were performing that.
Unless you're, like, playing the game in the dead of night on your TV and it's, like, very quiet, I don't think you're picking up as well as you are in headphones.
Because it's subtle, but there's a shift in the voice, and there's that sound of, like,
she croaks a little bit. And it's everything.
It's incredible.
And I want to give huge props to the Remake voice actress. She does a stellar job everywhere else. I love her Mary, and I love her Maria in every other instance. It's just that final letter, like, moment, it's not the same, because I don't think she actually genuinely cries, which is the point, which is the part of the original voice actress, that the original voice performance that really hit us.
Because, like, she just found it so heartbreaking that she actually broke down while reading it in the booth. Like, it wasn't a decision she made to go, I think it would work if I cried here. It was like an actual reaction, and those are the golden nugget moments of any performance, not just video games. You can't recreate that.
And I want to state, like, right here, I do not condone making voice actors cry.
No.
Performance, but like, this is just like a golden, like, once in a million moment.
And like, I hate this, but it's that same thing of like Django Unchained. That, you know, did you know Leonardo DiCaprio actually cut his hand? And it's like, yeah, we get it, but like, it's those genuine moments.
Aragorn actually broke his toe when he kicked that helmet. Did you know? Did you know that? If you didn't know before, we're gonna fucking make sure you know it now.
But yeah, it's like those moments where it adds to, you know, you can't recreate it. You know, Viggo Mortensen actually cries out in pain because he fucking broke his toe.
I'm gonna be honest, it makes the scene more funny to me than anything.
When you know it, and when you've heard it 1,000 times, it is very funny. But yeah, no, for 2, it's... Yeah, you can't recreate that, unfortunately. No.
We haven't even talked about, like, we talked about the Maria ending a lot and the voice performance, but even Maria and Mary as characters, and I have to talk about them both. They're interconnected. Yeah. But I love how Mary isn't as much of a character as Maria, because Maria shows up so much, but I love Maria's whole vibe for, like, because of her nature and because of what she is, because, more spoiler alerts, Maria's basically a manifestation created by the town from James's subconscious sort of desires, and like, but he basically, like, a very idealized, almost paper cutout version of Mary. A carnal craving of what he wanted her to be. I think is the best way to put it. Like, not so much subconscious, much more of like an instinctual, because of how, in a very not I don't know the
how do you word this, obvious way, but not in a directly played to the audience way, but like, she is more sexualized. She has more of like a kind of, you're meant to see her as more of a sexual person. Yeah. It's one of the big themes of the game, because there's a huge point of, like, the devs have talked about this, and like the writers have talked about this, where like the idea is that James and Mary, during those 3 years, obviously Mary was sick, but like James had urges, and like stuff he hated that he had and like didn't want to act on, but like obviously because they weren't, you know, doing stuff, it left him sort of more frustrated, and he's tried to keep that deep down, but like the town is sort of playing on that and using them as not just Maria, but like the mannequins have like very feminine sounds and like legs, and the nurses especially, they're designed in a very sexual way, which is playing off of that. So you have Maria basically being the culmination of all those themes, along with the other basically repressed like thoughts he had of Mary while she was sick, and also idealized. And I love her whole thing where, because of that's her nature, you kind of don't really fully ever grasp what she's thinking underneath. Because like, she comes off as very like, in some scenes she comes off as very, I don't know what the word to really describe it. She seems sort of dangerous. Like, you know, there's something not quite right here, and that you shouldn't really be trusting of her, but she's also at the same time very vulnerable, and there are times where you want to look out for her and you're thinking, maybe I'm just overreacting and she's actually fine. But it's that sort of complicated feelings you have that perfectly encapture what James is probably feeling as well. And it's amazing how they were able to get that across just from really the little times we see of Maria, because she's not in the game that much overall. No, she dies and then she dies again. She keeps dying. She follows you around for a bit. Again?
She follows you around for a bit, and then when you get to the hospital, she suddenly gets a sickness. I wonder where that came from. And then she's out of it for like that whole dungeon, and then at the end of it, Pyramid Head kills her, and then she comes back, and then she's dead again.
Which is funny, there's another choice that you don't kind of know that you're making, but if you go back and check on her, that adds points to her.
Yeah, exactly.
Ending. Which I did, so, but I didn't really interact with her much more beyond that. I was just like, I guess I should make sure she's not dead.
There was a moment I had where like it's in like the labyrinth scene where like she's behind the bars, and that's very much the scene where it's like, are you fucking with me right now? Like, what are you trying to get into my head? Where I had a moment, and I don't think this added to anything, but I did take out the gun as James was, and I was just like, can I just kill you like right now? Because I don't trust you, and I've seen a lot of shit today, and I'd really like to just uncomplicate it right now. Maybe that's the reason I didn't get the Maria ending in my first playthrough. It doesn't react to being shot at, by the way. You can just like try.
Okay, I didn't know that. I thought it was a case of like, I can't remember what. It's not. I don't think it's Silent Hill, but I remember trying to shoot someone in another game and like it just doesn't let you. I thought it would be like that.
Maybe it's Ashley.
I don't think I tried to shoot Ashley.
Good.
It would have been another problem character.
Okay.
But yeah, 2 is an incredible game. 2 is
a fantastic experience. We haven't even talked about Angela and Eddie.
No.
The other two sort of protagonists in the game.
Angela's whole thing is like, I'll do what I can't remember who made the video. Dubas
or I think that's how you say it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna do what he did and be like, that shit's so fucked up, I'm just not even gonna
I'm not even gonna joke about this one. I just love, I'm not making jokes about it, but like just to talk about her a little bit. I love how, again, very much like how 1 tells its story, her personal story is something you have to piece together. And it has a huge impact in the fact that once you do piece her story together, you're like, oh, fuck. That's fucked up.
Yeah. She's not... she only shows up, like, what, 3 times, I think, across the whole game?
And you remember each and every one?
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's 4 times, technically, because you have that boss battle as well that involves her, but, like, you're not fighting her, but you're fighting her monster.
Because, like, you've got the first time you meet her when you're going through the graveyard, you then meet her again in the apartments, you then have the boss fight with her, well, not her, but yeah, like you said. And then you meet her again shortly before the ending, too, which is where it's the most fucked up as well.
Yes. Because at that point, you've got all the pieces together, and it's very heavily implied that she's about to have her own in-water ending.
Yes, yeah.
In fire.
Yeah. Eddie's, a little...
He's a troubled young man.
Yeah. I think overall he's the least interesting of all the characters, though.
He's the least sympathetic.
He's a bit more one-note, I think, is the problem. Like, everyone else is, like, you can see the underlying complexity of their character and how their story has impacted them. Even if, like, Angela, like, you don't get a lot of it. Like you say, you have to piece it together yourself, and, like, it's... We're kind of just getting to see the end effect of everything she's been through. Whereas Eddie, it's like... I don't know how to put it. He's just not as interesting. At first it seems interesting. And then it's kind of like... You're kind of meant to be comedic relief, but at the same time...
The best way I can sort of describe him is to sort of basically describe the function that they serve in terms of James's story and why he interacts with them, which is... James, Angela, and Eddie are all possibly reflections of the 3 main endings you can get on your first playthrough.
Yeah.
Angela is your in-water stand-in, where she faces her demons, but the whole time she's very much not in a right mental state.
Yeah.
Like, the second time you meet her, she's holding a knife to, like, herself and, like, in front of a mirror, and you're like, are you okay? Do you need help? Can I help you? But Angela's whole thing is that you can't do anything to help her because you're a stranger and you don't have the capacity like to even possibly help her. So when you see her final scene and you know exactly what the implication is, there's nothing you can do, and it's crushing. Eddie, on the other hand, is supposed to be, in a way, a sort of reflection of the Maria ending, i.e. he completely gives in to his delusions.
Yeah.
He's supposed to, like, reflect this is what James could become if he doesn't try and move past it and instead revels in the actions he took. Which ends up with you having to kill Eddie.
Yeah, which was kind of satisfying.
Yeah, and you're not even supposed to feel fully bad about it. You're supposed to feel conflicted about it because you're like, I killed a human. That's weirdly familiar, but I killed a human, but I didn't. It was self-defense, but so I shouldn't feel that horrible. But I do. But he wasn't a nice guy.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's also, by the way, why you have 2 Pyramid heads at the end of the game, by the way, because it's the 2 murders that James has committed at that point.
I see. I did wonder where the second one came from.
I didn't get that until not long after my second playthrough, and I was like, motherfucker!
Yeah, I was a little less conflicted over killing Eddie, mainly just because, like, oh, you're a dickhead.
He is a dick.
Yeah, you kind of get what's coming to you, man.
Yeah. You can't just shoot people for how they look at you, man.
He said all that shit, and I'm like, man, I didn't even say anything. You just said all that shit.
Yeah. That's the point. We haven't even talked about Laura either. I mean, Laura's sort of a... There's so many places you can, like, talk about in 2. I'm sorry. This is
it's fine.
But, like, Laura's whole thing is she's, like, the most innocent character, so she doesn't really have to deal with any of the monster stuff.
She's also, like... I guess a lot of the characters aren't, like, super present, but I think Laura, of all of them, like, isn't really present until, like, the end section either. So I think it kind of... Like, so much of the game is the atmosphere of exploring, like, the town and then the apartments and the hospital that I think, like... You kind of forget her impact on, like, that section where James realizes what's happening and everything that's going on, like, when he either... I guess that's not the moment he accepts or gives in, but, like, it is ultimately a big point. Like, that... it's the... Is it the hotel? What's it called?
That's the hotel, yeah.
Yeah, the hotel. That whole section's kind of, like, weirdly important, but, like, I forget it's actually a part of the game for some reason.
It's because it's, like, it is right at the end of the game. It feels a bit like an epilogue, because you have a big climax moment with both the prison and labyrinth part, which feels like... It plays off very similar to how Nowhere was in Silent Hill 1, where it's like this big mishmash. You're fully into the madness, but then you've got a whole hotel section that feels like the sort of epilogue and, like, ending sections, really. But it does sort of have the effect that, like, what happens there kind of feels like a blur because you've been through so much at that point.
Yeah, so that's why, like, I keep forgetting that Laura's, like, actually really important to that, like, to the end of James's story, because, like, she's the person that actually he's talking to when he realizes what's happening, but, like, she's so not present throughout the rest of it. She's just kind of there to, like, tease James into being like, I know where Mary is, and then she leaves.
She's an annoyance for, like, most of the game.
Yeah.
And then you get to the end and you want to hug her.
Yeah.
I think I'm basically where I want to be with Silent Hill 2 right now, just talking about what I want to talk about in this stuff. I could go on.
Cool.
There's so many different, like, facets. We haven't even talked about the music, but I'll just skip that for now. We still have 3.
Yeah, I didn't like 3. That's what I've been trying to get to for a while.
Disappointing. How dare you? Friendship over.
I did not have a good time with it.
You really didn't. I will admit that. You went for the ringer for 3, and I'm not in a way I get it, but it's like it was somehow a lot more painful than my playthrough.
I there was a part where I was like, I think it's clicking into place, and I think it was a short-lived hour of the whole playthrough. Because the beginning,
exactly.
I think it's when you're going through the not the apartments, it's the
offices.
The offices, that's it. That was good. I really liked that.
That is like the best part of the game. That's fair.
Yeah, I was like, okay, this is Silent Hill. This is what I like about these games. But the opening, holy fuck! The mall can go suck a dick. The subway is just as bad. Mainly because
really like the subway overall. I'm gonna be honest.
Huh?
I actually really like the subway section.
I'm surprised because I think the subway, it tells you to do something and then you try to do that thing and then you realize that's not what you're meant to do first, but then you can't, the game doesn't really give you enough information to figure out how you're meant to progress. That's my biggest problem with some of 3, is that you kind of have to bumble around like an idiot.
I think I kind of take that, and I think I kind of like that a little bit, just because here's the thing, bear with me. To get back to my immersion thing, I think it really helps me get into the shoes of Heather and just being like so lost and like directionless just in where she is like in her story and just like her whole thing, because like to sort of get to the crux of my thing, I really like 3, and a lot of that is purely down to Heather. I'll admit, because Heather is a really great protagonist to me. I love her interactions with stuff. I love how she reacts to everything. She feels like such a good character. So being in her shoes, I think, sort of softened a lot of the quirks that 3 has for me.
Yeah, I like the characters, I like the story, but I didn't enjoy playing the game, so I don't really... It's hard to like all of that stuff as much as I could if I don't enjoy my time playing the game, and my biggest thing comes down to just the game actively hates the player, it feels like. Because you took your approach, and that's fine. And if you got the enjoyment out of it, that's cool. Like, that's fair enough. But there's so many little tweaks and changes from 2, specifically, that it means that any other playstyle is actively, like, more difficult. And it's not
you can't really blast through, especially on a first playthrough.
Yeah, and like I feel like games that are so like open-ended as to how you can tackle them, except for like sequence breaking, like we mentioned. 3 feels like such a regressive step back that like you kind of have one way of playing it, and if you don't, you're just gonna have a bad time.
Yeah,
and I don't like that, because the games before have given me enough freedom to enjoy playing the game the way I want to play it, whereas 3 is like, fuck you, do what I want, and I just don't want to do what the game wants, because I actually think the game is still harder than it needs to be if you're doing that, because some of the enemies that it's put in are like legitimately soul crushing to deal with.
I can't dispute that, because that's a very valid like point. There are, even in my playstyle, there were moments where I was like, what, okay, could you just take this enemy out? Why did these amount of enemies need to be here, guys? Come on.
Like no, that's the thing, because like near the end, when you're doing like the whole run through of like it's nowhere, right, that you're back in.
Yeah, it's like the church, but it's basically nowhere.
Yeah, and there's a part where you're walking along like a hallway, not hallway, but like an L-shaped walkway, and you can like fall off and stuff. But there's like the flying spinny enemy things. There's the guys
dogs,
that you spot as like
no. The sort of like stabby sort of guys,
you like fought them as a boss before. I think there may be like crawlers on one of them, and like it's like there's like 10 enemies all in this area, and you just need to get to the other side to go through one door. And it's like, man, I can also fall off.
Yeah.
So what am I meant to do? because some of those guys can grab you as well.
Yeah. At a certain point, if I'm not saying this is great design, but like there are moments where it really does expect you to take hits and just tank it.
Sure, I guess. Like, I expect that in any game, but I don't feel like Dark Souls or...
It feels cheaper here.
Yes, it does. That's what I was getting at. Like,
Yeah.
The only way I can phrase it, because cheap is one thing, but like, I feel like the game actively hated me the entire time. Especially in some of the puzzle solving. Like, I felt like this was some of the worst puzzles in the entire series.
Some are good, but some are really bad. It's like it's got high highs for me, but there are lows in the especially this one, which is explained terribly.
Yeah, it makes you think
absolutely
that
horribly.
The solution's somewhere else, and it's actually just written in the thing you're reading, which sucks.
Well, it's to me it was like this one like keypad sort of like puzzle thing, and like the clue is basically I forget exactly how it's worded, but I basically read it as you can't pick two numbers from this row, and the answer had two numbers from that row, and I was like, well, you just fucking lied to me. That's not a puzzle. That's just fuck you.
Yeah, we both use Silent Hill memories for these games, and like
that puzzle specifically is like the one that like I would never have gotten without looking up.
And like I find it hilarious because
that.
Silent Hill Memories does this great thing where not only does it give you the solution, it actually walks you through the logic, which I really appreciate, because sometimes like I said, my thing was that my logic just isn't getting me far enough. Like, I've hit a brick wall and I don't think I've got all the information I need, and sometimes it's just that I've not put two parts together that I wouldn't have naturally thought to put together, and that's fine. So I appreciate the logical walkthrough, but I tried to read the logical walkthrough of that that puzzle specifically, and it's so fucking long. The amount of steps you need to go through to figure out the results of that keypad, which is just 4 digits. Nah.
Yeah, that's I can't defend that, but at the same time, one of the most memorable puzzles for me was in the morgue, like not long after it, where like you have to like figure out the combination based on the bodies that are there, and like the numbers work with that, and I liked that puzzle. That was a fun one for me.
I thought it was fine.
I liked it. I don't know. Maybe
at that point it's just so
set up.
It was just so far in the game, and I was so done.
Yeah, at that point you were beyond saving.
Yeah,
like, the game was beyond saving to you, so I don't blame you for that. But like, I was still in it.
It had a lot. I don't even know if I can say it had a lot of potential, because like I say, I enjoyed the story. I thought the setup was cool, like starting in media res and the amusement park was really cool.
The fact that it's a sequel to 1.
The sequel to 1's really cool, yeah. But then that also comes down to my other gripe of the game of like, why are we just rehashing all the stuff from 2 location wise? Like, I know they would have had the assets, but
that is the thing that I will give some context there. So 3 was sort of made a bit of a compromise, I will say, between Team Silent and Konami, because despite how much love that 2 gets nowadays, it did not sell well initially, especially in Japan, at least to what they were projecting. It wasn't a complete failure, but they were expecting to push more units than they actually did. Yeah. And Konami, being Konami, basically lost any fucking confidence they had in the series completely, and decided that, and immediately just wanted to start switching to let's just kill all plans, let's just do something safe and just stop trying. Because originally 3 was possibly going to be a fucking rail shooter.
Oh.
Because Konami was like, I'm sure I told you this beforehand, that like Konami came in like, what if we made 3 a rail shooter instead of an actual game, because it's safer, that'll sell. To which Team Silent went, fuck no.
Yeah.
What if we play a little safe then and make a sequel to 1? Will that make you feel better? And Konami was like, okay, we might be able to be confident in that. But we're giving you a limited amount of time. So here you go. and so they basically had to reuse assets from 2.
Mm.
And that is why you go back to that part of Silent Hill and not Old Silent Hill, which makes more thematical sense for the story.
Because, like, you're in the hospital of Silent Hill from 2 when there's an actual hospital that you could have went to from Silent Hill 1. And, like, there's parts of nowhere where you go in and it's like they've clearly recreated certain sections. Like, you go in and I think there's a classroom that's very much a classroom from the first game. The weird Japanese style school that is randomly in Middle America.
Yeah. And we're interior-wise very much a Japanese school. Exterior-wise based on the school from Kindergarten Cop.
Yeah, that's weird.
It is, isn't it? Konami.
But yeah, no, 3, I wanted to like it. I really did.
Don't forget the recreation of Alessa's room from 1.
Oh yeah,
that's like a 1-to-1. I like seeing that.
Yeah, because don't they also recreate like that whole section's recreated, isn't it? Like where you've got the room that she's at, and then you've got the bedroom as well. Yeah, because there's a different puzzle with a different solution for that door, if I remember correctly.
It's not just like religious symbols just sort of scattered about.
Yeah.
I forget what exactly it is in 3, but it's like something to do with paper, I want to say. I'm not sure. Yeah,
I don't quite recall. But anyway, it's got some of the best sound design in the entire series. I'll give it that.
Absolutely.
And like that was some of the stuff kind of pushing me through it. I was like, oh, maybe if this is good, there can be some really good stuff throughout the rest of the game. But
the sound design when you're entering the office stuff and you're going up like the construction sites and like the scaffolding and all that, there was a part where like this is possibly down to when I was playing this at the time as well, because this is a section I played like at like around midnight to 1 in the morning. But like there was a moment during when you're climbing the scaffolding where like there are like intermediate sounds of footsteps, like either on different floors or like right next to you and stuff. And no shit, it's the only time in this trilogy I had to stop the game and just be like, nope, can't, I'll come back later.
Yeah, there were so many.
Fuck out of me.
So many rooms randomly that are actually just safe rooms, but when you walk into them, there's like, it sounds like someone's above you, or it sounds like someone's in the same room, or like someone, like not even in the game, like in real life, it sounds like it's ambient sound from without you, around you, and that messed with me a lot. Like that was genuinely the most tense stuff that I've experienced throughout all of this, because I just have a different relationship with horror.
Yeah, I mean, I had the same thing. There were so many times where I had to like keep like an ear open on like one of my headphones just to like keep myself grounded.
Yeah.
But it's stuff like that, and there's so many other like subtle things that like 3 does that I really like to go to the hospital thing. It is the same location as 2, but for me personally, it feels like there's a lot of unique stuff in there that it doesn't feel like a retread. Personally, like there's that whole story thing. It's not even really a gameplay thing of like Stanley, which is like a character you don't see physically at any point in the hospital, but he's leaving notes around for Heather, and he has a whole obsession with her.
Yeah.
And stuff. And it feels like the implications that he's somehow following you and watching you, like either from the walls or just like in a place you can't see or reach, but he's always somewhere right behind you.
I really enjoyed all of that. That was cool. And then the hospital flips into the other world, and that's just where I really started having a bad time with it.
You didn't like the Otherworld hospital part? With the trippy visuals?
If I have to be grabbed one more time by one of those crawly motherfuckers.
Is it the hospital where you get the mirror room as well?
Yeah.
Okay, that was a great section.
That was cool at first, then I had to repeat it because I fell down a hole that I had no way of seeing. And I had to repeat a whole bunch of stuff. which meant dealing with the grabby fuckers again. But they're more of a problem later in No World than they are like in the hospital. They're just kind of annoying there, but yeah. There is some really cool stuff. I really do enjoy some of it. It's just like, I don't know, like, it wasn't an enjoyable experience for me to play.
Yeah, if you don't enjoy playing it, then I can't really blame you for not clicking with stuff that is really good. I actually want to ask, how did you feel at the midpoint section of the game when Harry just fucking dies?
I thought that was wasted potential of bringing back the main protagonist of the first game.
Fair.
Yeah. I was a little disappointed that he's just fucking dead. That we don't really get to see him in the game.
I kind of got in the sense that if he was an actual character, he'd probably distract a lot from Heather, who the game is actually supposed to be about.
Yeah, I just maybe would have preferred him as a character instead of, Detective Man?
Oh yeah, Detective Boy.
Gumshoe.
Yeah, no, he's too much of a dick to be Gumshoe. Dick Shoe.
Yeah. Like, obviously he serves a different purpose in the end, but, like, it would have been more interesting, I think, considering the amount of links this has to 1, considering it's a sequel to the first game, instead of him, like, if Harry had played a more important role, like, I think that would have been interesting. I just would have liked to have seen him again, rather than him unceremoniously be killed off by a shady organization.
Yeah, the cult, basically.
Yeah.
There's also some characters I will say I do wish were fleshed out just a tiny bit more. Like, I like Claudia as like an antagonist. She's like a good character so far, but it feels like her interactions with Heather are spread up just a bit too far apart for it to really click. Like, Claudia has a similar thing where you don't really piece together her more personal story until like some later sections. Because the whole thing with her is that she was basically raised by the cult.
Oh, her.
In a very, yeah, her.
Sorry, I had to look her up. I forgot who the antagonist of 3 was.
Yeah, it's Claudia. How could you forget? She eats God at the end.
That's true. Yeah, I just remember that boss fight. I didn't remember who she was for some reason.
That's sad, because I did like her character. I wish she was in it more.
I think that's the problem. I just don't think she's in the game enough.
She has a really interesting backstory where she was raised by the cult and could really escape it. And from the notes we find, she was indoctrinated by like the cult from like her parents and basically everyone around her, and she had a very abusive upbringing because, you know, cult shenanigans.
Yeah.
So she's basically like holding on to this stuff in like a desperate hope because that's all she knows how to do and how to like really live. You still have to kill her in the end, but you know, there's a tragedy there.
Yeah.
And there's also that personal connection with Heather, or Alessa.
Yeah.
Who is also Heather. Who is also Cheryl.
Yeah. I think it would have been more interesting had she been more present throughout the game. Otherwise, I find her just kind of, well, I don't find her kind of forgettable. She is pretty forgettable. I didn't remember.
Yeah, you forgot her.
Yeah, I literally forgot her.
Do you remember Vincent?
Who's Vincent?
Other creepy cult guy who's kind of basically just in it for the money.
Oh, him. Weird anime guy. He's very anime.
He is. He's very dickhead anime.
Yeah.
He has one of my favorite lines of, you've been seeing them as monsters this whole time? That's a funny moment.
Yeah.
Not for Heather, she's horrified, but you know. You know,
they could have gave her a line as, it was foretold by the gyromancies. That would have made me remember who she is.
We don't get Dahlia in this game, or maybe we might actually in one part in the confessional.
Oh yeah,
Dahlia, where you can forgive her. Gives you bad ending points, which, I'm not sure entirely how that works. But
yeah, that totally seems like it should go the other direction for some reason.
maybe the game's saying she deserves hell.
Maybe. Yeah, no, I need to play 4 at some point.
Same.
I also need to finish 2 Remake, but that's a whole thing about the fact that I've kind of only just fixed my PC recently, which is an unrelated issue to what you were having that will have been talked about in the Ava episode, I think. Yeah, mine's wasn't like as disastrous as yours. Mine's was just like, for some reason, motherboard companies decide for AM5 socket CPU specifically to like overclock by default in a way, and
kind of
turns out it's just been leading to some very bad performance things on my end that at first I thought was down to other issues with games, and it turns out no, it just exacerbated all of those problems. Because I've talked about it before, and inherently Unreal Frostbite and a couple of other big game engines have traversal stutter, and that's bad. It feels kind of the worst example of it is Jedi Survivor, which even with my PC being fixed, there's no way that's going to feel any better, because that was swinging like a fucking madman between like 180 and 100 FPS, and like I'm talking on this setting, like with the problem I was having, I was losing like 15 at most, and like it was just stuttery. It wasn't stable. Now I can lose those frames and like it doesn't feel that bad. Jedi Survivor on the other hand is a completely different issue, and again, that's not Frostbite, that's Unreal. It's a badly under the hood made game that they've tried to fix and just it hasn't done much. But that's what happens when EA rushes it out the door. But yeah, no, I didn't progress through much of 2 Remake because apparently I was having a CPU issue I didn't know about until I randomly stumbled across fixing it the other night, and now I have a much cooler and less erratic PC that's also far quieter. Right now it's sitting at a very nice chill 51.1 degrees Celsius, that if we were recording this, in fact the last time we recorded this, like just whenever I did stuff, it would sometimes just spike to 70 degrees for like no reason, and like the fans would kick up. But yeah, now I know, now it's fixed. If you have a AM5, which is the Ryzen 7, the Ryzen, I don't know, their numbering scheme is very weird. So like, I don't even know, the 7 series and up, I believe the Ryzen 7 950 is specifically the one I have. There's the X3D version, but there's also the 7800, the 7500, I think, 7700 or something like that. Those ones and up, if you have one and you're maybe having some performance issues, or if your temperatures are very weird, if you have a very good cooler like I do, like technically I have a cooler overkill. Like I've got a 3-fan water cool liquid cooler that I don't really, it's a bit more powerful than it needs. And your temps are going like really high and you're having performance issues with games, like check that core performance boost and precision boost overdrive aren't on by default in your motherboard, because Asus and I believe MSI by default are turning them all on now for some reason, and it's technically overclocking your processor whenever you're playing games, because it's using any of the headroom that it can get to essentially just run the CPU faster than it should be, which can lead to degraded performance, especially over time, I believe, because you're technically just killing your CPU faster than it naturally would by using it like it's intended. But yeah, I will hopefully get back to Remake soon then, when I finish replaying The Witcher 3.
Oh god.
Which took me 123 hours the first time. So yeah, we'll see.
Sit tight, James. We won't be seeing you for a while. I hope you do get to like 2 remake to like soon though, because it is a good experience, and I think it's a very complimentary experience to the original.
Yeah, I think I just want to like, I think it'll be good to have a little bit of distance from 2 as well, because like I started it maybe only like a week after I finished the original, and so like I think having it kind of not as fresh in my mind while playing 2 remake will let me kind of engage with it on its own terms and like not feel like I know the story beat by beat. Even
I
though
can't say anything because I did exactly that. Like I played original 2 back in March, April-ish, and I only played like remake like a month or so after it came out. So I basically did that. So
yeah, so
I can't judge you.
Yeah, like if it's like 4 months from now, like I think that would be fair. I'll have forgot like the finer details of the game, and I think that will help for playing 2 remake. Especially because
I'll probably do a replay sometime soon.
Yeah.
Probably either the remake or the original.
But yeah, that's the original Silent Hill trilogy, and my disdain for the 3rd game.
Disdain. How dare you?
It's funny because I remembered you saying that about 3, like how you liked it and wanted to see my reaction to it, and I clipped it out and sent it to you right after I beat the game and was like, so
liar, liar.
About that.
Clearly, you just didn't get it.
No,
Clearly,
I got it. I just didn't enjoy the game.
You ever will. I am the better player, clearly.
On the upside,
You'll get it, man.
I did have to kill the final boss with a melee weapon, so that does mean I now have the unlimited SMG, so I can replay it and not deal with all that shit again.
Yeah. I doubt you'll be going back to 3 anytime soon, though.
No, not anytime soon.
I should really get on 4 at some point, or... Actually, I did start a playthrough of Shattered Memories at some point. I should get back to that.
I have 4 downloaded. I should probably go and grab Shattered Memories at some point. But yeah, I'm interested in 4, because 4 is like the first one to not be like related to Silent Hill directly, if I remember correctly.
I have played a tiny bit of, or I've seen a little bit of 4. I've not played it, but from what I know, it takes place in a different town, but the main character has some links to Silent Hill.
Okay.
And I think the main antagonist as well has ties to maybe the cult aspect. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe we'll do a sequel Silent Hill episode.
Maybe,
play the rest of the series and what witnessed the downfall.
Yeah, Silent Hill Downfall. Wait, it's Downpour, isn't it?
Yeah, and then there's Homecoming, which I hear is the absolute worst.
Yeah.
Can't wait to play it.
Well, this is the end of the episode then. Before we go on any more tangents, as fun as it is discussing these games, I'm hungry.
In my restless dreams, I see that end of the video.
So come back next week. I have no idea what we're going to be talking about. This is a random extra episode that's bled into February during this recording session near the end of 2024 for us. So, don't know what's coming the rest of the month except the rebuild episode. But yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
See ya.